Edgar Allan Poe, known as America's genius poet, is credited as the inventor of the detective story and is considered the master of the horror genre. His life was tragically cut short at the age of 40. The truth about Poe's death was immediately covered up by his enemies, and they concocted lies about his alleged drug and alcohol addictions. In truth, Poe was engaged against the enemy of America, the British oligarchs. Investigative journalist Alan Salisbury unearthed the truth about Poe. Salisbury's research led him to conclude that Poe was murdered by his enemies in order to stop his work. What happened to Poe was this. In June of 1849, Poe embarked on a speaking tour to raise funds for a literary magazine he hoped to publish. On September 27, 1849, Poe was supposed to board a ferry from Richmond, Virginia, to Baltimore, Maryland, and then on to New York. The night before the ferry trip, he visited a doctor in Richmond for a fever. Very little is known for certain what happened the next few days. Poe arrived in Baltimore on September 28th, but he didn't go on to New York. He turned up in a tavern in Baltimore on October 3rd. He was in bad shape and nearly unresponsive. A note was sent to a local doctor, and Poe was soon admitted to a hospital where he died. One odd detail is that the clothes Poe had on did not appear to be his own. Instead of his usual black wool suit, he was wearing dirty second-hand clothes, a cheap ill-fitting suit, and a straw hat. Literary theorist Jonathan Culler had this to say about Edgar Allan Poe. Nowhere else in world literature, so far as I know, has a writer been so scorned by the literati of his own language and so celebrated by the best minds of another culture and language. He also went on to say that while ignored in the U.S., Poe's short stories, essays, and poems were hailed by French writers such as Charles Baudelaire, Paul Valéry, and Stéphane Mallarmé. Was there some deep and uncanny relationship between Poe's writing and French readers? Culler calls this mystery a tantalizing problem for literary history. What is generally not known about Edgar Allan Poe is that he knew a great deal about science. Poe talked about and described things that would later come to be known as the Big Bang, the space-time unit, and the equivalence of matter and energy. He also talked at length about the speed of light, black holes, and would describe a changing, constantly evolving universe. Investigative journalist Alan Salisbury found that evidence pointed to the fact that in the early 1830s, Poe was assisting James Fenimore Cooper and the Marquis de Lafayette's attempts to establish a French Republic for the second time. The Marquis de Lafayette headed the European branch of intelligence services for the Society of Cincinnatus, which he founded with George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, and which included Quartermaster General David Poe, Poe's grandfather and close collaborator of Lafayette during the Revolutionary War. Salisbury also thought that the name C. Auguste Dudoupas, Poe's detective character in The Murders in the Rue Morgue and The Purloined Letter, and which had been the subject of much debate among Poe scholars, would have been referring to one person only, Charles A. Dudoupas of Paris, a leading figure in the École Polytechnique circles of Gaspard Monge, Lazare Carnot, and their associates. Salisbury said that it is the École Polytechnique method of scientific investigation that is the subject of Poe's detective tales, or tales of ratiocination, as Poe more properly termed them. There was one man that Poe considered a deadly foe bent on destroying the continental system of science in the United States, and particularly at the West Point Military Academy. That man was Sir David Brewster. Poe had exposed Brewster in his brilliant critique of Hegel, Philosophy of Furniture. In this essay, he described a race of time servers and money lovers, children of Baal and worshippers of Mammon, Bentams, who, to spare thought and economize fancy, first cruelly invented the kaleidoscope, and then established joint stock companies to twirl it by steam. It was Sir David Brewster who took credit for inventing the kaleidoscope, and together with Sir Walter Scott formed a stock company to finance the making of a steam engine to twirl it. Poe's sarcasm was aimed at his enemies like an arrow dipped in poetic poison. He knew who he was fighting. He said, "We know the British bear us little but ill will. We know that in no case do they utter unbiased opinions of American books. We know that in the few instances in which our writers have been treated with common decency in England, these writers have either paid homage to English institutions or have had lurking at the bottom of their hearts a secret principle at war with democracy. We do indeed demand the nationality of self-respect. In letters, as in government, we require a declaration of independence. A better thing still would be a declaration of war. It was because Edgar Allan Poe waged such a successful campaign against the enemy that he was slandered during his lifetime, and in fact lost his life for it. He is continually slandered by misinforming and misdirecting the public with lies about who he really was. They say he was a strange and drug-addicted alcoholic who wrote morbidly gothic poetry, when in truth he was truly a Renaissance man, interested in science and poetry, and in the whole of what makes up existence.